Good evening. I'm Holly Wall. I'm the town administrator for the town of Chesapeake Beach. Thank you so much for coming this evening to our utility fund outreach session. So just to get started, the logistics of the meeting, we have released a form where citizens have submitted questions to the town on the FY24 utility budget. And we have incorporated those questions into this presentation this evening. We also have forms in the front at the table here, where you can also put your name, address, and question. Additionally, you can scan the QR code and submit any question electronically, and staff will find it. So first, we'll start with the mayor.
Okay. Hello, everybody that is here in person, watching live, or via the recording. I thank each of you for your time to learn more about the town's utility fund. I also want to take a moment to thank our staff who spent countless hours reviewing multiple scenarios to balance the utility fund. This outreach session is provided to ensure that citizens understand the recently introduced utility fund budget and the $33 a month or $1.09 a day sewer fixed fee. To put our cost into perspective, let's look at our neighboring jurisdictions' water sewer rates. The town's water services for residents are currently 57% less than if you had the same home, same family size, a few miles away in Calvert County. Even with the sewer fixed fee, that same homeowner will still be paying at a rate of 28% less than if they lived in Calvert County. We are all proud to live in a town where one of the most state-of-the-art treatment plants in the state is ours. Our plant is an enhanced nutrient removal plant which decreases the nitrogen and phosphorus released into the Chesapeake Bay. Our plant can process up to 1.5 million gallons a day of inflow. In order to maintain the health of the bay, we need to keep our treatment plant at maximum efficiency. I'm going to call the increase $1 a day for the Chesapeake Bay. Lastly, it is important for me to go on record and state that the implementation of this $1.09 a day fee brings us in alignment with other jurisdictions, and there is no projected increase in this fee for at least 3 years. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mayor. So just some highlights in terms of the utility fund. So historically, the utility fund has been supported by high density development, as well as has been supported by the general fund. So that's general taxpayer dollars offsetting deficits in the utility fund. So the utility fund is an enterprise fund, which means that user fees support user cost. And this is really important because if that does not happen and user fees are not supported by the costs that water and sewer users incur, we end up placing a liability on the general taxpayers out of the general fund to support the utility fund. In addition to that, if it's not self-supporting, so if it's not a self-supporting fund and it's receiving revenue from general taxpayer funds, it limits the town in our ability to obtain grant funding through the Maryland Water Infrastructure Finance Program, as well as loans through that program. So it's important that we have a balanced budget with sufficient reserves from user fees. And this is important because we continue to have major infrastructure, both short-term and long-term, which we'll cover in more detail with our Public Works Administrator. But these fees that we have are 97% of fixed cost. So that is why there is no projected increase to the variable cost for citizens. We have a $100 sewer fixed fee that would be applied quarterly by dwelling unit. And so the variable costs will stay the same because those fees that we are incurring for the cost are truly fixed costs. So 97% of our costs are fixed. And this is really a cost to turn on your water and flush your toilets. And I will turn it over to our town treasurer, Brittany.
Hi, everybody. This covers the utility fund reserves in more detail, the equity or net position. The first column, you'll see the utility fund balance. This is as of year end FY22. And this is the unreserved, unassigned fund net position. You'll see the required reserve. This is in order to maintain the financial stability and also mitigate any risk associated with this fund. This does not include any non-reoccurring costs. For FY24 budget, that would include the one-time establishment of the treatment plant reserve for roughly $366,000, and also the $465,000 that is budgeted for meter replacements. This is truly just recurring operating cost. And that the third column, you'll see that we have a reserve deficit of $4.8 million. And that, as I mentioned, is to maintain financial stability as well as mitigate risk. Another key financial highlight that's not on the slide is that the proposed budget is showing an operating ratio of 108%, which in simple terms would mean that for every dollar in revenue that we're receiving, we're spending in operating costs $1.08, which is not sustainable. To the right, you'll see a column that's long-term debt to equity. This is just showing that we have 3.2 times the amount of long-term debt that we have in our equity reserve unassigned. This slide, cost structure, which we went over when we introduced the budget, and this just shows you what the reasoning would be behind the increase in our expenses. We're seeing about 40% increase in chemical costs, 35% in utility rates across the board, 35% increase in sewer treatment cost, a reoccurring increase in infrastructure improvements, preventative maintenance that we're prioritizing, and also a result of historically unsustainable user charges that we've been implementing in the utility fund. I also just want to point out that it's important that we prioritize the investment in infrastructure, which Jay will also mention, but this also adds a decrease in the operating reoccurring cost if we're proactive instead of reactive. So you'll see an increase in preventative maintenance, but it's at a cost to the town as well. Next two slides are just pie charts of our breakdown of our utility fund revenues and expenses. First, you'll see the revenues, and you'll see the major portion is fixed fees. We have a couple items, including transfers and capital connections, which are being used as operating to cover operating expenses, but they are actually non-operating revenues. That would be capital connection fees, which is 15%, and transfers, which is a transfer of our fund balance, our net position that you just saw in the previous slide. You see we have a deficit in. So again, not sustainable. Likewise, this is just showing the breakdown of the expenses. And I wanted to clarify that majority of it is 46% is for the treatment plant. That is the town's portion of the treatment plant budget that we share with the other partners to the treatment plant. A portion of this, the $366,000 I spoke of before, is for a one-time establishment of a reserve. The rest is the operating cost of the treatment plant that we incur as the town. And that is an increase of roughly 8% over last year. And then you'll see various other categories, including our debt service for the year and minimal expense breakdown of repairs and maintenance, which is a result of in-house maintenance that is being that's taking place, which is cutting down the cost of contracting services by a substantial amount. I also wanted to just reiterate the fact that there are a portion of expenses in here that are for staff time and also just general expenses for contracting costs that are allocated to the utility fund for the utility fund. It's not commingled with the treatment plant or any other fund. And that's a very conservative number. Jay.
Good evening, everybody. Jay Berry, Public Works Director. And for anyone here, I brought some show and tell if you want to look at it, and anyone in public, I'm going to leave it here for a while. So when we spoke about this opportunity, I wanted to come up here as Public Works instead of just saying I need $375,000 for X and Y. I figured I'd want to go through the actual items and have the public understand it, because just like you, I live here too, and I'm going to get the same water bill. So to put in perspective the importance of infrastructure improvements and having the funding available, ensure they take place, I want to provide a few examples. In Richfield Station, there is a significant number of water main failures. Anyone that lives there has probably seen us out in the street. And lately we've been kind of dead end streets back where you may not have seen us. But this is within the last 2 weeks of infrastructure that has failed. The reason they're failing is because at the time they were installed, they used iron saddles. We have acidic soils, and we have underground stray current. So these parts of our infrastructure are failing prematurely. Some of this product is only 15 years old. All three of these conditions combined are adding to that. So Public Works has responded and repaired over 50 water main failures in the last 5 years. That's almost an average of one a month. These breaks are unplanned. They involve an emergency response, overtime, considerable damage to the road and subbase, not to mention the residents that are offline, without notice. And pretty much we stay on task until we can return them online. So due to us doing the repairs and learning and understanding the situation first the last 5 years, I've realized it's very predictable the next one that's going to break. And I almost in-house joke with our staff, we're going to get called next month. It's going to be here, and 9 times out of 10, I'm right. They don't appreciate it, but it's what's happening. So what we've done is taken a proactive approach, spot check in some of these areas to go in, change the saddles before they fail. Right now, we're using a contractor through the American Rescue Plan funding, because the utility fund at this current time isn't set up for that amount of funds to do it. We don't even have the reserves to do it. So what we're doing is we plan to be proactive, saving the utility fund. I've already done the math, 60% per saddle versus going out proactively and changing it or waiting for it to burst. And that's not factoring in the indirect costs. That's just the cost of material, labor, time, and everything else. So when a failure occurs under pressure, a large volume of water is released under the road. All that material is compromised. It must be hauled off site. Then new material brought back. So a proactive repair methodically in much less time, less material to be hauled off, hauled back, a much smaller hole in the road, much less cost of staff time, and much safer to do it planned, daylight controlled conditions. So if you came up here and looked at it, this is not a new phenomenon. Other counties, I've talked to a lot of people in the last 6 months. When you have electrolysis, acidic soils, and metals underground, there's so many unknown theories and different things. But to resolve it, what we're going to go and do is we're replacing all the iron saddles with stainless steel, non-ferrous metals. We're replacing the copper laterals with HDPE, a plastic pipe, and we still have some meters and componentry in the system that we cannot replace that we're going to protect cathodically with anodes. I've done some research with a couple people from WSSC and other areas that should add 100-year life to the components that we're going to leave instead of rebuilding the entire system. Looking forward, when we noticed this, the town stepped in years ago for Chesapeake Village and the Heritage and changed what we were allowed to put into the ground, what we allowed the contractors to use. So in those areas, we're not going to face these problems. We use stainless steel products and plastic laterals. So we also installed a third-party inspection for developers and direct public works inspection to avoid these problems in the future. To add to the normal infrastructure improvements, we are faced with increased flooding risks that require relocation and upgrade of critical infrastructure. One of the things projected in here is relocating a Harbor Road well house. If anyone that's not familiar with that, if you left here and you went down to Harbor Road and made a right towards Abner's, you make a left behind that swamp and behind, thanks, Holly, behind Beach Elementary School, it's the bottom arrow here, is where our road, or our well house actually sits, been there since the 80s. That road's been raised twice since I came to town, and it still floods on a high tide. There's no sense in reinvesting in that particular location. That place needs to be rebuilt. So what we're going to do is move it up out of the wetland up to the actual tower, where it should honestly be in the first place to feed the tower instead of back feeding the system. I'm also looking at, when we do that, can we pipe it in to feed it to the top of the tower? Can we install a altitude valve at the bottom to save us some money so we can feed it locally? I'm researching the most cost-effective way to do it, but the bottom line is, to invest in that well house, we have to move it. Fishing Creek wet well needs an upgrade. If you're not familiar with that, it's over here behind the courtyards, behind the marina, built in a swamp. It's suffered, Isabel infiltrated it, high tides sometimes infiltrate it, which causes corrosion damage. It's also at a lower elevation, and also due to it being built in a swamp, it's kind of shifted over the years. I'm currently looking at a retrofit to raise the existing top, replace some of the structure, raise it in elevation to protect it, versus building a whole new structure. Unlike Harbor Road, we cannot move its location because the gravity lines that dump into it can't be moved without moving the whole development. At some of our older sewer wet wells, we have generators that have been in place. The oldest one's 24 years. We've got several that are 20 plus years old. I myself am keeping them going as long as I can. There's two reasons. You don't want to replace it. It costs more. The second reason is, honestly, is I myself can figure that thing out in the time of most need because it's simple. The newer ones have emissions. Sometimes they're so smart with built-in technology that they won't run. You can't get them running when you need them the most. But the bottom line is, two of them right now, I looked at 4 years history of our provider that does the maintenance on them, and they're increasing at a rate of, they're going to need to be replaced. So those are up and coming, and I have a plan laid out on that. That just gives hot topics to some things that are in the infrastructure that are no choice, has to be done. So some general comments. All the physical components of the utility system have gone up 15 to 25% within the last 3 years. And those are the parts that we can get on hand. The market's hungry, the price is high, and we're reaching out to Ohio and places I've never even talked to before because there's a lack of production in this country, and the EPA doesn't accept certain things in the water system from out of the country. They don't meet the same standards. It's got to be built here in the U.S. for the water side. Some of the products I'm ordering for Richfield Station are 30 weeks out, just to give you an idea. Contracted services have also increased considerably over the last few years. And at the same time, those contractors are not as available as they were. So it's when the market's hungry, you pay more. Parts and maintenance of our own town, like I said, Public Works has done the 50 repairs in-house, and it's about $11,000 a repair if we were to pay a planned contractor. If you pay one that came in an emergency call, you can add about 50% to that. So to maintain our own in-house equipment, all of our materials and parts have gone up 15 to 25%, from oils to gaskets to hydraulics to buckets to everything else. So in the end here, with 3 water towers, 13 pump stations, 13 electrical pumps up to 30 horsepower. These pumps, Mears Avenue pump weighs 790 pounds, just to give you an idea. 4 backup dry prime diesel pumps, 17 generators, 50 plus miles of water and sewer lines. There's a lot to maintain in the infrastructure if nothing ever broke. I mean, it's a considerable cost, and anyone that lives in that world knows the value of PMs versus stuff breaking. And in the lower right is the dry vault for Fishing Creek. Above it is the generator, and the door is rusted and it's older, which doesn't bother me, but that generator's considerably old, and to replace it, you need new EPA standards, which have DEF fluid emissions, has a chip in it, upload technology, give a report every year. It's different when you're a government and you have a backup system. So that's it in a nutshell. I wanted to share with the public kind of what we're spending some of this money on to give you an idea and what it takes. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
Sure.
So as Jay mentioned, the town is doing things to decrease costs. The majority of that is being able to maintain these services in-house, having skilled staff member and the materials. So making sure that we're purchasing in advance, that we have enough chemicals and supply on hand in case an emergency takes place that we are not able to get it. So I think the sewer fixed fee works, and why it's been proposed in the budget that was introduced is that it captures all users by the equivalent dwelling unit and accounts for the costs that do not vary. So each of our users, so we have some larger users that have multiple EDUs, and those are counted for some of our commercial users, which we'll talk about in a moment. But basically, they're going to receive the flat fee for every EDU that they have. And we'll get into the definition of an EDU in a moment as well. It also captures the cost of high demand users. And it ensures the burdens on the water and sewer system are accounted for. So it allows us to plan for long range infrastructure improvements. And it captures the cost of turning on the water faucet and flushing the toilet, as we've said. It also provides consistent budgeting for infrastructure improvements, and it is consistent with neighboring jurisdictions. So what is an EDU? So an EDU is an equivalent unit, and it is defined by the town's water and sewer manual as 190 gallons per day. So the town does not make an assessment on residential dwellings by EDU. So if you're a large family and have a higher volume of use, we're not going to calculate that you have more than one dwelling unit. But it does come into play with our commercial accounts. And so they are calculated on an annual basis. And that goes by how many taps they have purchased. And the tap is actually a purchase of new connections. So during development, if there's new services, a developer will come to the town and pay a tap fee. And so it's calculated every year based on a long range of information that we have. Right now, we're using 10 years of data for our large commercial users. And so it's one fixed fee per 190 gallons. And so to put into perspective kind of the difference between our residential account holders and our commercial account holders, we currently have 98% of our account holders are residential and only 2% are commercial. So that is really just a property address or an account. It doesn't account for the demand that they're using of consumption. So when you look at that on the consumption side, the commercial actually flips to about 18% of our usage, and residential at 82%. So when you look at the 18% commercial usage, you might be thinking that we're just talking about our businesses, but we're not. Our largest user is our Chesapeake Beach Water Reclamation Treatment Plant. And so the Chesapeake Beach Water Reclamation Treatment Plant provides water from the town to service Anne Arundel County, Calvert County, and the town of North Beach. So they're our largest user. So as we continue to try to supplement this with general taxpayer dollars, we're really supplementing outside of the town. And so that's a big factor in why we want to be sure that we're capturing the true cost of usage. And the water park is also another high user in that list. So we've also made adjustments in this proposed budget to also increase water connection fees. So those tap fees that I was talking about a moment ago, we have increased water connection to $10,000 and sewer connection to $20,000. So each new connection to our water or sewer will have an increased cost, and that is reflective of the increased costs that we have to maintain infrastructure. There was a question from a citizen regarding our introduced budget and that we have 20 connections projected and where were those new connections taking place. And those are actually projected in the Richfield Station development off of Crestview Lane. There's a development there that we have a public works agreement with the developer currently, and he's working on turning those lots over to a builder. So we have projected 20 new connections. And as our town mentioned, those connections really should be set aside for infrastructure for the future. But even with this sewer fixed fee of $100, we still do not have enough funds to truly do that. So it is that 20 new connections will be going to balance the utility fund budget. So to look at, again, how we compare to other gens, we are talking about $100 a quarter per EDU cost. So that's about $1.09 a day for the sewer fixed fee. So only if you have town sewer would you incur this additional cost. There's no projected increase to the variable water and sewer rates, and this would start effectively July 1 of this year with the new utility budget. So when we look at our new rate, so this is our Chesapeake Beach new rate here, including the sewer fixed fee, and at a 12,000 gallon user, the average cost is going to be about $250. We see our neighbors in Calvert County are still $100 more a quarter. Also at the 18,000 gallons usage, we're projecting the rate bill would be about $305. Our Calvert County neighbors are still over $100 more. So these are neighbors that are in potentially the Twin Beach, so they might be outside of the service area. We have some that are in the town limits, but receive services from the county. So they would be paying this higher rate. And so just to put that into perspective, I think that these costs from other jurisdictions as well are pretty reflective of the true cost of operating a water and sewer system. We are making, this is a drastic change and we do recognize it, but it is a step in the right direction to be sure that we're not supplementing the utility fund with development, that we're not looking for connections to balance our fund, and that we're not using general taxpayer dollars to do that as well. So thank you so much for your time this evening, and happy to speak with you individually if you have questions.